sports, which is a curriculum we're currently in the process of developing at Santa Monica College. Nice to meet you all.
Nice to meet you.
Likewise.
Okay. And Maya, if you can introduce yourself, not just who you've been to me, but just everything you can share about your work, your passion, and the expertise you bring to the table.
Sure. So I guess I wear a few different hats, but mostly I run a DEI consulting firm. And so I end up doing a lot of research on DEI in different industries, as well as facilitating a lot of conversations and creating a lot of DEI plans at this point for organizations that don't have anything in place and hadn't really thought about diversity, equity, or inclusion. And I'm also a research professor at University of Maryland. So research is a big area to me. I'm really interested in kind of looking at the root causes of things, as well as what makes people successful or able to overcome obstacles that are put in their way.
Great. And Lamar, can you bring kind of your latest and greatest perspective on things, not just your CV, but anything you can share with us about the current state of affairs for you?
Yeah, sure. I mean, the ability to take design and creativity and leap into technology and actually create businesses and or opportunities is what my career has been for the last several years. And part of that is also being an instructor at a design school here in LA, Art Center. And so a lot of what we're talking about with SIGGRAPH and a lot of the folks that are part of that ecosystem, I've used the products, and I've also kind of thought about the teams that execute with them. And so it'll be really cool to kind of just discuss a lot of that potential for the new audience to discover these opportunities.
Great. And this is really more for Redelia. Redelia, can you share any thoughts about how SIGGRAPH and its community, and I'm going to underpin community with the organization who's the overarching, let's say, manager of all the things that SIGGRAPH intends to be. The organization is called the Association of Computer, not the manufacturing, ACM. What does ACM stand for, Lamar? The Association of Computing Machinery, ACM. Right. So Redelia, what ACM and SIGGRAPH has been for me is a place where there's a lot of work to be done in diversity and inclusion. When I first went to SIGGRAPH in LA 2017, it was in LA 2019, I was surprised that there was less than 0.1% of people of color, especially Black people, in this particular conference. And I got a registration, it was $1,500. I got a registration from someone who said, hey man, if you want to be a futurist, you got to be at this place. And one of the things that I did when I registered, I looked at some of the speakers and the corporations were there, and I didn't know any of them. I think of myself as a creative, a filmmaker. And what the Association of Computer and Machinery did for me was to think about all of the futuristic things that are happening for creatives that have to understand how to use the software, and also open sourceness in terms of how people have to be so much more open and available to change. And that's one of the things I realized was going to be very difficult for me to bring a lot of people in my community is to change. And so when I kept going to ACM, I'm a member of a group of people who are concerned about white papers and things that involve diversity and inclusion, but they're really concerned about what diversity and inclusion is and what it isn't. And so a lot of the things that I found in diversity inclusion, ACM, SIGGRAPH, and some of the organizations is that a lot of the people who are in that space are white males, and they've attacked the problem of finding a way to bring in more women as their number one initiative. But the women that they have brought to the table to put these breakout groups and these little special interest groups to deal with diversity and inclusion have been white women who believe they need to bring in women, but also been really strongly focused on LGBTQ. And that, I think, is all they know. Because what I've done is been involved in these meetings and these planning for fellowships, for internships, their webinars, and all their resource material, and their outreach to people who are Black and brown or underprivileged leaves a lot to be desired. So therefore, I decided that I wanted to take on the role of finding people inside of SIGGRAPH, ACM, and the breakout groups to bring more people in my community into focus so they understood that there's people looking for change and looking for people like them, but just didn't know how to reach them. So I met one person inside of SIGGRAPH as well as the Academy of Software Foundation. Her name is Jennifer Goldfinch. She works for a company called Foundry. And she's the person who's really spearheading an effort to bring folks from Santa Monica College through David Hall, and David could make the call today, into the whole realm of diversity inclusion inside of visual effects, animation, 3D, and all the other industries are part of this growing, emerging technology-focused creative mesh. So what August 11th will do for us, I believe, is to open people's minds to the possibility that there's a group of people who've been somewhat marginalized. I won't say left behind, because they don't know what they don't know about this community of underserved, underrepresented, under-resourced, and disenfranchised people that I'm focused on. And Jennifer believes that these are people that she wants to know. So therefore, after August 11th, she's working on putting together a mentorship program for a group of students in a classroom at Santa Monica College that I think are really focused around using software that Foundry has. It's called Nuke. It's a software. And Santa Monica College apparently has purchased this software to teach students about how to composite and produce visual effects product. And that is a great project, but it has not taken effect yet. I've been working with Jennifer for almost 6 months, but it's taken some time. So we can't announce it. We can't do anything other than continue to let Dave Hall from Santa Monica and the instructor in that department work with Jennifer to figure out how to make that work. And the overarching goal is to bring a group of mentors and volunteers who want to work with people from underserved, underrepresented, and underappreciated communities to some conclusion. The organization is doing this stuff in UK, New York, and other places around the world, Japan. They're called Access VFX. But we're not going to talk about them on August 11th because, again, there's just a lot of work still to be done to try to put this thing together. They're looking at February, fall semester 2022 to try and put something together with this class in Santa Monica. So can't make the announcement, which is really a bummer for me because I want to always have an on-ramp for people to figure out what they can do to be part of a change. And I'm not sure when that on-ramp will happen, even if it's going to happen February 2022, but that's where I continue to keep doing my advocacy work for change and bringing partners together so that they can try and work on a pilot project. So with all that being said, August 11th will be focusing on a conversation called Upskilling a Diverse Workforce during the pandemic. And so we did this panel with Maya moderating, I believe it was April 26th for the California State University Entertainment Alliance, which is a a group of faculty, trustees, chancellors from the California State Universities who have digital media and film and TV programs. And I am a member of the California State University Entertainment Alignment Advisory Board. They have invited me to submit for a grant to put together a capstone project that will continue to expose four-year university students and their alumni to opportunities. I'm going to focus on diversity and inclusion. I'm going to focus on underprivileged people as opposed to just everybody in the diversity inclusion bubble. So I'm going to be a specialist in bringing people from underserved communities that I know of who need and deserve a chance to be exposed to new things that will be a change in what they get potentially for expansion of their understanding of how the industry is moving in different directions. Why I invited Redelia onto this call was because she is part of a program that I believe is really a part of the change in community colleges. And I want, if you can, Redelia, to explain a little bit about your vision for how Promo Pathway under your leadership can potentially use some of this change and potentially even partner with us in producing some outcomes. So this is more of a question for you than more of a statement. So any thoughts you have, Redelia, about this new role you have with Promo Pathways? And I know Lamer's familiar with it.
Hi, so I want to start off by saying that SIGGRAPH, from my understanding, is a more of a computer-oriented visual effects space. So people that are learning like Nuke and Maya and 3D programming and maybe some game engine kind of content is what those professionals are working in and what those students are studying specifically. And I want to make sure that you're very clear on the distinctions in film and media production, because yes, there is some crossover in terms of like, I am multicam in media production, I'm unscripted content. And so like shows like The Masked Singer, which uses visual effects, AR and VR type of technology, America's Most Wanted, there's a lot of programs that use that, especially in COVID, where they're dropping in the audiences. And then of course, in scripted, we do a lot of visual effects as well. But because of COVID-19, we're doing a lot more virtual production, which will probably be here to stay. But in my understanding of the workshops that I've attended and also my experience, because my graduate degree actually was in digital filmmaking, but was visual effects oriented, it is for people that are really more so computer programmer, computer science, visual effects oriented, and that they understand some basic filmmaking processes. So your target audience is really, I think, and in terms of getting people of color, more people of color, I don't know the numbers in Chris's program because he specifically teaches visual effects at the CMD. And David Havalosa, who I'm working with esports, where we use it as well with esports. So that might be a connection there, definitely. Because we're, having to design our ROS graphics within an Unreal or Unity space with the games that we use for the playing. But most of the students that are majoring in film and media production, and I have to kind of include Promo Pathways too, are really focused on like editorial of like live action content. They're not per se visual effects oriented. That's a different population of students. I do think that there is the idea that there's probably a lot of people of color majoring in IT and computer science. And I think that there could be some conversations in the computer science department about encouraging those students to be more visual effects oriented, because those are similar skill sets, and then they have the programming background for it. So, I'm just trying to make sure that we all on the call understand the delineations between the students that I service specifically, they want to be on set, on a 12-hour day, go on the trucks, wrapping trucks, set dressing, production design. If they want to be in post-production, specifically, it's in editorial. And Promo Pathways is editorial specifically for promos. Of course, every year I can do a little check to see if anybody's interested in learning more than they do learn some graphics. So they touch on After Effects because they're doing motion graphics in the program. But typically, if they're going to work in creative at a studio, there is going to be a graphics department in the studio that's really going to handle that. They just need to be able to put temp graphics in their projects for the producers to come in and take a look and see if this is what we're going to go with for the teaser or the spot for the network or studio. But they're not doing like high-end visual effects, which I think SIGGRAPH is the kind of conference that specifically focuses on that.
Right.
Oh, that was a course in and of itself, what you just said there. That was great. The clarification was really precise. One thing I'm curious to ask you about, when it comes to feature films, the distinctions around how the opportunities and the types of jobs that can be had for some people, is there any overlap with the feature space as opposed to TV and kind of
Yeah, absolutely. But then again, like Third Floor is the #1 free-vis studio in LA, but there are others, right? And in our visual effects program, we are really training our students to be able to do pre-vis. Now that we're upscaling a lot of virtual production. Mandalorian is a great example of that. And also the multi-camera projects I just mentioned are a great example of that as well, where, you're putting everything in the volume, you're loading up to the volume. I just did an email to Chris about this specifically because the film department have been talking to a virtual production contact. They want to set up a virtual production pathway. I've been kind of letting them take the lead on that because, my plate is already full. I teach 5 classes and I'm leading 2 other programs and I'm developing curriculum for another. So, I have an extremely full plate. So there's only so much I can handle, but I am going to be in the meeting to participate and see what they're coming up with because we do share a studio. And it would be great for us to, get the LED screens in there, and I can use it for our multi-camera shows, like our news show would be great. The esports would be great. We want to do a game show or talk show. We would just have to load in all the assets in the volume or get probably the visual effects students to do that, to design those, because our students do not have that skill set. They do not have the skill set to be doing 3D, and they can do 360 camera, but they're not doing 3D virtual reality type stuff or AR type stuff. That is a very different student that's interested and engaged in that. And so, and for feature films, that is, those people they were more than likely visual effects majors or computer science majors that went into visual effects. And that is the group of students that you want to talk to and attract. They're not going to be film and media students because that's not really what their lane is or their interest.
One of the things that I wanted to bring up was a conversation I had with David and a woman by the name of Charlotte Augustine. Lemurs met her. We met her at a conference for the LA, I don't know if it was LA EDC or it was LA County, Orange County Regional Consortium, but it was a meeting where we talked and discussed about soft skills and programs to bring in community college students who were a little marginalized in areas of trying to level the playing field for them to be exposed to certain things. And one of the things that I asked Maya to be involved with all of our discussions and moderating is around the idea of what are some of the best practices of upskilling young people from diverse communities so that they are not only getting skills from the disciplines that they've decided they want to go into, but what are some of the other skills, whether it be soft skills or business skills, that they can learn and integrate into their development, quite frankly, so that they can become better prepared and more competitive at getting any job, whether it be, working in very specialized areas or again, just getting in the industry, getting in the door. So Maya, to your point, is there anything that you can add about what are some of the things that people of color from, especially the HBCUs, are needing to integrate into their game plan to get more competitive in any fields where they're going to get placed?
I mean, I think it depends on sort of what level, or whether you're talking about college or high school or
Well,
or
primarily folks who are job ready, who have maybe either their 4-year degree or somewhere in a program, advanced placement, who believe are job ready, and maybe coming more from a human resources perspective.
I mean, I think some of it is getting them networked in properly, because that's the best way to gain entry into anything, is to know someone that's already there, who can to some extent vouch for you, and also who can serve as, if the, at sort of a minimum, as a occasional advisor, to make recommendations for you, and at best, a really good mentor. But networking can be really effective. There's a really famous area in sociology called the strength of weak ties, and it just shows that the people frequently, most frequently get jobs through some kind of connection that they have, and it doesn't have to be their best friend or their family, but it's 2 or 3 degrees of separation, but that's how they're gaining some kind of entry. That's how they got in. And then there's other research that shows that people do better when they enter from, if the person that they were sort of networked in through, or that they came through, wasn't through HR, but was through was a manager of some sort, or executive. Just depends on what level you're entering in. So I think exposure to networking is really, really important, and then also just exposure to opportunities, to work experiences before that. So if you're looking at a company that's in tech, they don't want to just see that you got a degree in computer science. They want to see that you had internships in different areas already. And that's been I think that's been sort of a big loss. I mean, there was the kind of, ridiculous Google Howard connection that didn't really do much, and didn't have a good placement rate for students that were effectively interns there. But I think it could have been pulled off in a much better, more effective, meaningful way, so that Google wouldn't look like how Google continues to look, and probably always will look, right? But I think that there's a lot to be said for for providing people with some kind of something that's akin to an internship, an apprenticeship, whatever you want to call it, some kind of work experience, so that they haven't. And even if they're not going to get hired at that specific company, it's a signal to other companies. It's a resume builder. And there's this thing, not to ramble on, but there's a document that the ACM and IEEE put together, and I'm guessing that they've updated it, but they basically went through and talked about, like, what does the core curriculum look like for people who are getting their degrees in computer science and software development, and all sorts of other sort of tech fields, and they put a lot of work into it, but what it misses is that they've added they have all of these electives. And I think what students of color in particular, and especially people who might be first generation students, are missing is those electives are really meaningful for what courses you're actually taking and what jobs you can get. So a lot of companies, they're looking for the degree, but they're also looking to see how you specialized or what you know. And, and again, it comes back to having internships and the right networks, but that kind of information, knowing what extra areas to look at, I think that's really critical and oftentimes just completely absent.
Wow. Well, thank you for that, Maya. One of the things that I wanted to stress about my discovery of things inside of ACM and SIGGRAPH and the Academy of Software Foundation and some of the other organizations that are doing work in the area of diversity and inclusion is that, and I just put in the chat box, ACM diversity inclusion. So if you get a chance, look at some of the white papers and some of the best practices they're using to try and grow the numbers of people who are just in their community. But what Maya said was something that I think could be a really important part of my internship program is to teach people about networking. And the archetype of the person that I want to bring into a networking environment for my network is something that really involves the matchmaking of people's spirit and their interest in being pliable and malleable. And that is something I've yet to find in some of the students that I'm working with at the university level, community, or high school. So somewhere, somehow, they're very rigid in how they determine what an opportunity is. And I think it's a good thing to be focused, but you never know when you're going to meet somebody who can introduce you to something that sends a light bulb off in your head and say, oh, I didn't know about that. So I'm looking for people who are a little bit more open to opportunities that they may not have been exposed to before. So exposure to expansion of their brain saying that, wow, okay, let me look at this. But I do know with the pandemic, people are challenged to meet the burden of taking a full load of classes. Some of them have financial, even housing, childcare issues. And so is there anything that people can think about as to how to address those students who are already marginalized before the pandemic, who are now on top of their issues and trying to compete? They're now dealing with a lot of stress and stressors. Anybody have any thoughts?
If I can just interject, I mean, I know I said that networking was important, but I think when I look at networking, I have a small concern that people don't know how to network, but it's also making sure that you've broken down the barriers to those networks. And so it's not about, to me, it's less about making sure that students understand, or people, whoever you're talking about, understand that they can and should be doing this, although that's critical. But it's also making sure that those gatekeepers, those people that they should be networking with, are available in some way, and that doesn't happen organically. I think you're talking about something that's more thoughtful and systematic, and so you can teach people nice ways to network, and proper way to give someone a handshake, and that they need to follow up, and those are good skills to have. But I think that the bigger barriers are the people that they need to network with, the people they need to know aren't a bit, have not made themselves available. And so it's getting their buy-in to this process and getting them to the table.
That is a huge, huge effort for me to find people who are mentor-like, who want to volunteer, who want to make themselves available with their busy schedules and times, that they could do so in a meaningful and sustainable way. I don't think anybody wants to do one-offs and disappoint people because they really just don't have the energy or the stamina to take on a student or a group of students. So I'm always working with people who do the extra and giving of themselves to sometimes to their detriment. So that is an issue. Obviously, during pandemic, everybody has a lot more or a lot less time and energy and more constraints. So yeah, it's an issue, but that's why I believe I exist. And
Well,
some of the
Kevin,
people,
so I just had a question on that. I mean, as a topic point, um, is part of our mission with the SIGGRAPH panel to discuss how companies should be doing what Foundry is doing, which is stepping up and providing the infrastructure for the people that are employees in their ecosystem to be at the table, to welcome the students into that company's world, and to help them basically kind of get their first cracks at the bat and so forth. I mean, I think the value proposition around that is not necessarily completely understood for the companies. What does that do for them? So I'm just curious if that's a chunk of our panel time that we can unpack that a little bit, because we've got the students in their world and what they're doing, but then we've got the companies that need to frankly understand that their employees need to invest some time in that.
good question. I think that is something that Jennifer can tackle with this one company. I'm going to put them in the chat box here. The model that they have should be discussed within the world of VFX animation and gaming. This is it. They're called Access VSX. And she believes that their database of willing volunteers, mentors are there, and they do this work as part of their corporate culture or their individual ways to take on an opportunity to provide these resources for these students. And that is really the rub, is that most of the people that I know, they want to help, but again, they've got day jobs, they've got families. So what I'm actually looking for is a very innovative way to take whatever they have in time and try and crunch it into some module that I can deliver that will still allow them to provide what they can to a group of students, alumni, or people just looking for tactics and techniques to get into the industry at any level.
But then, Kevin, you're knocking out what Lemur had just. So that I think that I hear what you're saying, that people are limited on time, and I completely understand that. But I deal with these companies every day in terms of trying to get them to to have some kind of buy-in for this work, because it's not just about about them bringing people in, but being able to keep them there, and as well as attract them, and that is something that that isn't, I try to make sure that they're not shunting it off to their entry level or lower level employees and making that a bigger piece. It's it's the people that are managers and executives that should be responsible and accountable for this work. And I think you don't get to any of that by providing modules. I'm not saying that there isn't value in those modules, but I think you don't tackle those issues about how do you make an organization ready and willing and able to actually receive people when you're again sort of putting it back to what can we provide to individual students or individuals who who want to get jobs. I think Lemur was, and correct me if I'm wrong, Lemur, but I thought that he was sort of onto something about how do we get the companies to understand what their responsibility is in this.
If I can interject and also give an example of what Promo Pathways has been very successful in doing, is number one, we have a partnership with Promax, formerly Promax BDA. It is a professional organization. It's a nonprofit. They have members who are all, most of them, if they choose to be members, working creative at studios and networks worldwide. And so on their website, they have an entry-level position, and you click on the entry-level position and you see Promo Pathways at Santa Monica College. we are currently the only school that they have this relationship with. I mean, hopefully there'll be more in the future, but currently we're the only campus. Now, this is by industry buy-in. So all of the people that are a part of this organization, they go to the annual conference every year, they participate, they win awards, et cetera, et cetera. They have buy-in because their umbrella member organization is partnered with our campus for these specific jobs. So now all we have, and this is the area where I'm going to come in and do additional work on, because I have a friend who's been doing some DEI work here in LA to talk to some of these studios, because currently ABC gets all our business. Like every year we have 3 or 4 promo pathway graduates who then get hired at ABC. And then our former alumni are moving on to other places. One is just now starting at Disney in the creative department. So our students that are alumni who are at all of these different studios, they know how good the program is, as well as the people that work around them know how good the program is. In fact, one of the people from ABC just entered the program because she's an administrative assistant there. And she said, wow, this is amazing. And this is really what I want to do. So I'm doing promo pathways now. And she, from, her experiences with our graduates. And so that word of mouth is what, solidifies the program and its success, and that students are graduating with the skills they need to work competitively in these arenas. So that is the kind of buy-in that you need. Also, I think what would be very helpful, Lemur, is if there was some funding, and also like detailed funding on how businesses can pay the apprentices that are coming in, because they're basically giving them a chance. They'd rather hire somebody with more experience, that with more established credits and that kind of thing. But if this funded program is the one that's paying these, recent graduates to work for a year at their company, hey, some of them might get hired, but then some of them may just use that year experience as a resume builder and transfer, and go to another organization using those skills that they've learned. Because you have to have that experience, you have to have a portfolio. In our industry, they're not hiring you just because you took some classes and did some projects in school. You need to show that you can do professional, work. And what I really appreciate what we do at the Center for Media and Design at Santa Monica College is that we have students doing a lot of case studies with organizations. And a part of that's proximity. Like, we're next door to Red Bull. We're around the corner from HBO and Amazon. So our IXD students have been doing case studies, ever since the Bachelor's of Arts program started on our campus. So that's the kind of stuff and buy-in that you need for people to feel comfortable with hiring recent graduates, and them also being on the advisory boards. You'd have to, find somebody who's interested and engaged to be on advisory boards in the campuses in their community to, give suggestions on the curriculum and, make sure that students are having the current industry trend skill sets in order to navigate into the industry outside of, the soft skills that they're hopefully developing when they're matriculating in the classes. So I hope that gives a little bit more clarification around that. There has to be industry buy-in. There has to be, a way for them to pay the people that they don't feel good about hiring right off the jump. So something like that would really need to be developed. And more than anything, students need to have professional portfolios where, the caliber of the work is something that, that industry professional can look at and say like, oh, okay, that definitely has some potential, so that's how that goes.
Right. So we only have like 12 minutes left before I know some people have to jump. Lemur, did we answer any part of your question?
Yeah, no, she definitely delivered, and that was spot on, Maya, as well. I mean, the one nuance I would say around it is some of the companies might not be able to pay until they've actually vetted the person after a while. So, and that's a company kind of operations issue or topic. But I think literally presenting that to say, hey, we've been doing this at Santa Monica City College for, many years now, and here's how we've done it. this association, Kevin, that you just pasted the link to, that Foundry is a part of. We can discuss that as well in terms of if these companies that have people at the SIGGRAPH event aren't in it, or they are and they didn't even know about it, then we're just surfacing it and really talking about all the ways to get involved, because it is being discussed, but it may or may not be effective unless these people really kind of maximize what they're doing with it. So
Right. And I just had a new person that joined, Terrence Coles. If you can unmute, want to introduce you as a person who's worked with me in trying to deliver something that I want to point out in the panel, which we called a career exploration experience. It was a 15-week experience, the capstone, with a opportunity for students to pitch a group of, well, not a group, basically an audience of peers and other faculty. So Terrence, if you can just chime in real quick, we've got about 10 minutes left, and we're talking about what we can do to really mesh on things that we can talk about on August 11th. And by the way, it's a Zoom call, so everybody can join. Everybody will be seen. Apparently it's up to 100 people, but there will only be 3 people who will have the mic, and we'll have a Q&A for people at the end of the panel on August 11th at 9 a.m. So Terrence, if you can introduce yourself real quick.
Yeah, no, Terrence Coles. So I'm the head of the media network at Redbox, but been working with Kevin for a number of years, really trying to help students understand the pathway and the opportunities as it relates to getting the work environment. And one of the last immersive media classes, we were trying to have students, interesting, the last call we were on, what's your social media profile, right? How important that is, build up your resume. We're also trying to give them skills to build up a portfolio. And I think I've heard all of those things as important. The other piece that I heard mentioned here is how moldable or how willing is that person to subject themselves to what it takes to be, in a company like that. Really, you have to come in and make yourself valuable in some manner to that company. And that may mean I'm getting coffee or picking up laundry or doing whatever, even though I have a college degree. And I have some experiences in going through media myself as a minority. I mean, I'm the senior most African-American person at Redbox, and I'm still a senior director, right? I'm not a VP, all the rest, I run $6 million worth of business, but the key being, how do you get in that role? How do you get those positions? How do you find that out? So I'm very interested in ways to work with candidates who understand that they want this opportunity. You have to want it. And I think, Lamar, to your point, some companies could maybe not pay you, and you can say, hey, maybe there's value though in what else you could get in exchange if you're not being paid. Certainly everybody needs to work. I waited tables to make money while I took my first job in radio, making $15,600 a year, and had to wear a suit and tie to work every single day for a year and a half. But they told me, if you're still here after like 2 years, you're not really worth your salt. You're not cut out for this business. But they introduced me to everybody in radio business, the business of the business. I mean, I work with people at Fox and Pennzoil, big things, which got me a job at K-Rock, selling radio airtime. Again, only Black person selling media at K-Rock, and they got bought by Infinity Broadcasting. But again, being a student, being willing to move up. By the way, that K-Rock position, 100% commission. You got 3 months worth of a draw. If you don't sell, you don't eat. And it was a shark pit. First person to the desk with a check wins. It was rough. It was brutal, but it was a great experience to understand what you need to go through if you want a career. I wanted a career in media and advertising, and I was willing to do whatever it took. I would like to find people who are open to understanding that's a path you may have to follow. It's not glamorous, but there are things you can get. And so just connecting the dots, telling those stories. So I'll sort of pause there. One thing that, Kevin, you're talking about is, how do we get folks? I have a vested interest, right? We've been doing this for a long time. I'm doing this just because I see myself in a place and I don't see people who look like me, and I want to change that. I'm older. I've been around the block. I was at AOL in '96, and this K-Rock, I'm 56. And, where's the people coming up behind me? I've had too many people tell me, I say, hey, what's your diversity plan? And Kevin, you've been on some of these conversations. We have jobs, we have availability. I don't see a pipeline of qualified candidates. I don't see folks who can come in and interview well. I don't see folks who can come in and just represent themselves in a way that I want to hire them. They come in with an entitlement or an expectation of what they think it is, and they talk like they know what they want. They don't even ask the question, what are you looking for? How can I make myself valuable? How did you get into this business? How did other people like me get into this business? Anyway, those are things I think, if you look at SIGGRAPH and the technical professionals that are, to bring it home, at SIGGRAPH, the key would be to have some of them, if we could, share with some of these students their path. How did they get into this technology path? Because it probably wasn't straight away, or maybe it was. Maybe they were a super coder, they knew this software really, really well, and they just needed somebody to say, hey man, you know After Effects? I need an After Effects guy. I just talked to a woman that we hired, she's outsourced. Why do we hire her? She knows After Effects. She produces great videos. And that's not a skill that necessarily even requires the college degree. She does great videos with After Effects. Your portfolio will speak for itself. So anyway, I would hope that with SIGGRAPH, as you have people in those positions that maybe look like us, to explain what it took to get there, because it's not a straight line, and prepare some of the students to be willing to accept what it takes to do that. That's something I'd love to be a part of. And I think that's something I'd love to be part of in this 15-week scenario, right? I think we have a good blueprint. I'd like to follow it more stringently, to your point, Kevin, and also have people help to educate on what they know, right? You guys know what it takes from Santa Monica College, and I was, very happy to hear, you place people at ABC Resilient. So what's that look like? What's the characteristic of the kids who have made it and gone on to matriculate through it? What's that common thread that made those people successful and move on versus people who didn't?
Yeah, professionalism, being able to communicate effectively and very well, and having an awesome portfolio. My goal is to, like Redbox, y'all probably have a creative, department. So our students, which would be like when you go to the box and you see the little promos, that's what we're training our students to be able to do. So your company should be in partnership with us so that you can look at the end of every year, we have what we call our industry roundtable, where they come and the students talk about their work. It's kind of like an interview, but prior to COVID, they would be set up with their laptop, all of them with their laptops. The executives would walk around from creative, and they would see everybody's work, and the students have to talk about it, has to talk them through all of the samples that they've been working on all year, with all of the various software, including After Effects, that the students have to learn to do the motion graphics and cut the images. And we get the content from the studios that the students are cutting with. So they send over their content, just old stuff, whatever. Sure. And our students then cut the promos. And so they're able to see, oh, this is what this person did with what we sent them. So that's the point of the program. So make sure you email me if you know somebody in creative that will be interested in being in partnership with our program.
So what I'd say,
guys, we have 3 minutes left. We have 3 minutes left. I'm going to open up the floor. Does anybody have any questions, suggestions, or comments for August 11th? Because we have a lot of time to try to boil down what this 15-week program is. So I'm going to open the floor up. Anybody have anything that they want to add in preparation for August 11th?
Yeah, I'll just drive in here. So I just think we want to get an outline of what our presentation or a flow or run of show looks like, just so Maya is able to kind of know where we're all headed. And so we can maybe contribute to that in an email chain or something where, we kind of block out the time and what we're going to try to cover in it.
That would be great.
Anybody else with any questions, suggestions, or comments in preparation for August 11th, SIGGRAPH? And this is for everybody. If you can't hold it with me, everybody needs to register. I'm going to send everybody the password for registration, Del21, but I'll send it to you. I'll send also the link to the panel. It's called Upskilling a Diverse Workforce During Pandemic. And there's a lot of meat in there, but I want to be able to make sure everybody who's on the panel, that's Lamura and Maya, send in your release form to Jennifer so that she can get it to SIGGRAPH by the close of business today. As a matter of fact, if you can do it after you get off the call, because I'm going to send her the recording of this because she couldn't be with us today. But literally, she's going to drive this thing to make sure that we're really knocking out of the box for SIGGRAPH. This is going to be recorded on demand for ACM and SIGGRAPH, and we want to be able to point to it and make sure that everybody understood that we're looking for partners and all the goodness we can get from SIGGRAPH. So again, with a minute we have left, any other suggestions, comments before we wrap? Okay, so again, thank you guys. I'll send the recording to everybody else, but look for any information from Jen. I hope that we get a chance, if we don't do another huddle before August 11th, she'll have everything in there. And once we get everybody's stuff as to, you know, everything we'll need to know to be on camera for Zoom, 9 a.m. August 11th. It's 9 a.m. Pacific time. I think everybody here's on the West Coast. No, Maya's on the East Coast. So that's 12 noon for you, Maya. But this is a Zoom one, a lot easier than the hot pins we've been doing. Okay. All right, guys. Thank you for your time. Have a good weekend.
You too. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye.